Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we're going to continue our 10-question series focusing on best ball and rookies because it's freaking April 1st, not an April Fool's joke. It's just the reality of the situation, everybody, and we do not have live football to talk about. Everyone chastised me for years when I supported the AAF and the XFL because I like watching live football. Is it that big of a reason to hate me? I guess not, but it is what it is. Either way, good topics on hand as I try to stop rambling here. So, very special guest today. You can find his work over at Establish the Run. Fantastic dynasty ranks that I've checked out, throughout this offseason, and also just general fantasy football goodness. Also co-host of Ship Chasing and Establish the Edge podcast, the man, the myth, the legend, Pat Kerrane, who you can find on Twitter at Pat Kerrane. Pat, thank you so much for the time, man, and happy April Fool's Day.
Yeah, happy April Fool's, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
Man, I really thought, I don't know, it's one of those content moments where I was really just, I remember thinking yesterday, like I should really put some thought into this, come up with a good April Fool's joke. I don't know. I finished a bottle of sheesh and on midnight, I was just like, oh, it's not AJB wide receiver 1 season. I let myself down. I let my Twitter followers down. And you know what? We'll be back in 2021. But this podcast will not be a joke, everybody. Again, I want to be focusing on rookies, best ball, dynasty, kind of the whole kabang. Pat, like myself, we focus on football pretty much 365 days a year. So a lot of exciting topics to get to here. And Pat, first thing, I want to talk about rookies in best ball because I know as someone that have, again, your dynasty ranks, I think top 150 you have over at Establish the Run. So it's huge right now. And if you're doing a dynasty draft before the draft, if you're one of those savages, you can make, it some good value for yourself. More realistically, you're probably doing a best ball draft where, okay, we see Najee Harris, we see ETM, we see kind of the big guys up at the top. But if you know anything about these other rankings, you're going to be able to get them at a value that we're just not going to see once their eventual landing spot is revealed, come the end of April at the draft. So what is your general, philosophy on approaching rookies in best ball drafts right now before we know their actual landing spots?
Yeah, I think what tends to happen is that there's a few guys that get priced pretty close to where they're going to end up going after the NFL draft. Like, your Jamar Chases, the big 3 running backs, Kyle Pitts, like they're not sneaking up on anybody. But you are seeing stuff like Zach Wilson is quarterback 27 right now. He's probably going to be the number 2 pick overall. I think his ADP will go up a bit. I mean, he's got pretty big arm. He's mobile. I think he's kind of a nice, cheap quarterback 3 that you can add. You can even just start to stack him with the Jets if you want. You're trying to, in a lot of these best ball leagues right now, they're tournaments. So you're shooting for upside. So if you go ahead and get a really cheap Jet stack with Wilson, I kind of like that. I think Trey Lance has huge upside. He's going to be a high draft pick. He's going quarterback 29, another kind of swing for the fences, quarterback 3 play. And then even the running backs, Harris, Etienne, and Williams, I think on an individual level, they probably have some of their upside baked in, but I think one of these guys is probably going to end up in a really good spot and we're going to get really excited. So I would try to have some exposure to those guys still. And then what happens beyond the big names is I think at running back, there's some guys that have a pretty high floor in terms of their NFL draft position. Like Michael Carter's not going to fall out of the draft. Kenneth Gainwell's not going to fall out of the draft. And I think even Chuba Hubbard probably, maybe he's a 4th or 5th round pick, but I think he's got potential for day 2. So those 3 guys I think are pretty solid. Outside of that, I'm not diving too much into the running backs for best ball drafts because you could be talking about guys who aren't even drafted. At wide receiver, though, I think similar thing where you've got, Chase, I think Devonta Smith, those guys aren't catching anybody by surprise, but Rashad Bateman, I don't think his upside is fully baked in. He had a bit of a disappointing pro day today. He's only 6'1", 190. I think we all thought he might be a little bit bigger than that.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But he was an extremely productive college wide receiver, extremely efficient over the past 2 seasons, had 3.47 yards per route run over his last 18 games. The rest of the team combined for 1.62. So just wildly more efficient than his teammates and dominating the market share of that offense. I think he's going to be a good pro, and you can get him at wide receiver 50. So I like him a lot. And then you've got a bunch of boom bust guys later on. Terrace Marshall, who's got, I think, a really high ceiling, didn't do anything until his final season, but he is an early declare, and he was playing behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson previous to this last year. So like, what was he supposed to do?
Right.
And he's a young guy. I think he ran a sub 4.40. So I like him a lot. And then Diami Brown is another guy. I know PFF's really high on him, and he's basically free. He's going to have a pretty clear-cut role in the NFL. He's going to be a deep threat. Same with Marshall probably. And, these are the better and best ball guys. So I like getting those guys pretty much for free, and just kind of adding some additional volatility at the wide receiver position. And generally with these best ball leagues, I like to go a heavy amount of wide receivers and really get those later picks with those volatile wide receivers that can add points to your team every week.
Yeah, if you happen to, get the running backs you want early, you can have these roster constructions where you only have 4 or 5 backs potentially and kind of use those extra slots at wide receiver. I love the philosophy because I do look at guys like Etienne and Harris and the guys that, to your point, are already kind of priced pretty close to where they'll be within. They're within the same tier of where they'll be once they're on the landing spot. Like, that's risky, but the guys you're talking about, they're going down in the bottom with kind of guys that we almost already know are backups. So if it's someone where you already know their role and you already know their role is nothing, resembling a super fantasy friendly guy, why not take a shot on the rookie that, a lot of people are not as high on as they inevitably will be, when they are in May. So you're not going to lose your draft because your 14th round pick trying to take, Michael Carter or Kenneth Gainwell of the world. And I love the point about Zach Wilson with the Jets. I mean, how high do you think his ceiling could be? Because generally, man, I wrote an article on Justin Fields and kind of his potential top spots, and just quarterbacks picked in the top 10, like, every now and then you get the Mahomeses of the world that don't start that often. Jake Locker was the last one to not start a single game as a rookie, but usually you get drafted in the top 10, you are going to be out there. The average top 10 QB since 2010 has started 12.3 games during his debut season. Just 4 of the 23 QBs drafted inside the top 10 started fewer than 10 games. So Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, it just seems like they're going to have a starting job somewhere. And right now they're being priced as guys that either don't have a starting job or we're just kind of expecting them to not be very good with it.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a good bet to make. I think the Jets are going to trade Darnold. I think they're going to take Wilson and then trade Darnold. And I don't want to, if a team tells me that they're going to commit to this quarterback that they just took number 2 overall, I'm going to say, okay, he's probably good then. Or you're going to give him enough of an opportunity to put up fantasy points. I mean, we laughed at the Giants when they took Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones had a pretty good fantasy rookie season. Blake Bortles was a bust, but he actually had a pretty good, wasn't so good as a rookie, was more as a sophomore. But these guys, even guys who we don't think are going to turn out long-term, if they get drafted high, they're going to get a big opportunity. They can put up fantasy points. They don't need to be actual good NFL quarterbacks to contribute to your best ball teams. And then sometimes we're really wrong. Like Josh Allen was kind of thought to be a terrible pick, and he's turned out to be a really, really good NFL quarterback. So I think you got to trust the draft position to some degree and trust that, if they're going to spend the number 2 pick on him, he's going to be their starter.
Yeah, I'm done writing off first-round quarterbacks when we haven't seen them play an NFL snap yet. Daniel Jones, Josh Allen, even Justin Herbert last year, all guys that were mocked the second they landed on these teams. Turns out, the guys drafting them in the top 10 knew a little bit something about football, a little more than guys like us sitting, in our mom's basements talking about ball in March and April might know about it. So, yeah, certainly not a bad idea to, just value the draft capital, man. Look, it's good to know everything we can about these prospects, but just don't get in the situation where you make up your mind on a player before we even know what team they're eventually going to be playing on. That would just be my one kind of caution to people really out there diving in these prospects. And, that kind of leads us in the second question where, man, one day after another, it's okay, Mac Jones going number 3, but oh my God, you see the reaction after he overthrew one deep ball at the pro day. And meanwhile, Justin Fields is running really fast and throwing, the ball really far. 2 things that we saw him do repeatedly over each of the past 2 seasons. So, look, landing spot, it's going to be crucial for these guys. I'm not getting caught up in the pro day hoopla. We know Lawrence is going to the Jags at 1. We know Wilson, like you said, probably going to Jets at 2. But otherwise, let's say, Fields, Lance, Fields, Lance, Mac Jones.
Jones.
Fourth. Yeah, there we go. Sheesh. We know those guys are likely going to be following up. After the Jags and the Jets, what landing spot are you kind of penciling in saying, hey, if we can get one of these teams to devote their, franchise to one of these top rookie quarterbacks, where could this quarterback land and immediately thrive in fantasy?
Are you buying the Mac Jones to San Francisco at 3?
No, not at all. I think it's, I think anyone that believes that is just being a mark, and they should look themselves in the mirror and, evaluate things.
All right, good. I'm glad, because to me, like Trey Lance going there would be really, really exciting. I think, you've got the bridge quarterback in Garoppolo there, and Lance has just an immense ceiling. And, I'd love to see him in the Shanahan offense. I think that would be really, really fun. I would also like Fields there, but for some reason, I kind of feel like they're thinking Lance, but if they took Fields, I would also love that. And my thing, like there was a lot made about how they went to the Mac Jones Pro Day, but they traded up to 3.
They already know who they're getting. Yeah,
before the Pro Days. They decided, I don't care about the Pro Day. So then after that, who cares which Pro Day they don't care about they go to? So I'm not buying the Mac Jones thing either. And Fields or Lance there, I think would be the most exciting, but Carolina is the other one that I'm really hoping they land one of Fields or Lance. And again, they have that bridge quarterback set up with Teddy Bridgewater. I have a lot of DJ Moore shares in Dynasty, so that would be really good for that. Robbie Anderson's a good wide receiver. I think that, obviously they've got Christian McCaffrey. So they've got an offense that can really help out a young quarterback as he develops. They're really trying to figure out their quarterback of the future. I think it'd be awesome to see them land one of those two guys.
Okay, so again, I don't want to keep pimping out my Fields article all podcast, but I was breaking down top 5 landing spots like I asked in this question. 49ers, I had number 3. Panthers, I had number 2. Number 1, just in terms of, I think, the ease to maybe go in and seize that starting quarterback job, I think it's the Denver Broncos, man. Unfortunately, I don't see them really moving off of 9, so we'll see if one of these quarterbacks even lands to them. But if we can get someone in there to throw to Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, AJ Hamler, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick, Albert L., there are weapons all over the place, man. I hear you. If it's a situation where just where do we want the guy to go, I think the Panthers, Joe Brady and Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers, like those schemes and those are better real life situations than the Broncos. But in terms of just 2021 fantasy value, man, I think if someone can get to Denver, unfortunately, probably kick my guy Drew Lock to the curb, I think they can make a lot happen with that offense.
I would love that too. Yeah, they'd have to make a trade up, but you could definitely see it happening. Yeah. I would be really excited if either of those guys go there. I'm less excited about Mac Jones, but I would, even if they got like Mac Jones, that would be something at least. Cause I don't know if Lock's going to end up doing it.
I don't know, man. Again, people he was 5th in big time throw rate last year, and he was 35th in turnover worthy play rate. Like, I understand people that don't have to, do this for a job weren't exactly trying to watch like every single Denver Broncos game week after week, but there were legit flashes of brilliance, far more flashes of him looking awful, which should outweigh the small, great plays. But if you're a bad quarterback, at least be a bad quarterback that sometimes is good. That was what Drew Lock.
He came through in a couple of big spots in DFS.
Look, man, not every quarterback is a finished product after 2 years. I dubbed him potentially a millennial Ryan Fitzpatrick, and all the haters on Twitter said, well, actually, Ryan Fitzpatrick is a millennial. So I'll worry about that player comp a little bit more in the future. We'll smooth things out in the war room and get back to it. Pat mentioned before, but you have an updated Dynasty Top 150 over at Establish a Run. Your top wide receiver tier in order: Davante Adams, DK Metcalf, my guy AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley. All ballers. You're happy if any of these guys are on your team. Let's play some devil advocate here. Out of that group, who would you most be willing to part ways with for the right trade offer?
I actually think it's the guy I've ranked first, Davante Adams.
Wow.
I think most people have him wide receiver 1. That's kind of the consensus. He's sort of a consensus first round startup pick. So you're going to get the most for him. He turns 29 in December. He's entering the last year of his deal. I don't think they're going to blow up everything, but they did just take Jordan Love last year in the first round. They could, kind of just reset after the year if this year ends up being kind of a disaster, or, there's some downside risk with Davante Adams with the age and the contract. He's definitely a true league winner type right now. Historic season last year. If you're contending, if you're just coming off of a title championship game, I'm riding with him, but you need to be in that spot to be rostering him, because it's not just that, he's going to probably have his best chance of another huge season is this coming year. But also, it's like, this is probably the last time that you're just getting a king's ransom for Davante Adams. After this year, even if he turns in a really nice year, he's going into the season where he's turning 30, and people are going to feel pretty uncomfortable giving you a ton for him. So I think just try to honestly assess your situation. And that is the guy that I would try to move on, even though I have him first. I think you just have to factor in what you're going to get back for these guys.
His value has never been higher. I mean, to your point. So you are going to get the biggest trade package possible, and deservedly so. The guy did nothing except ball the hell out all last season. But yeah, man, I mean, you would like to think that Adams and Rodgers are going to be in Green Bay for the next half decade, but maybe not. Why did they draft Jordan Love? And it's not like we haven't seen these alpha number one receivers get traded. Hopkins, Diggs, OBJ, just in the last few years have been shipped away despite having overwhelming success with their previous teams. So it's interesting. I thought you were going to go with Ridley, but just in terms of the trade package you could get, I would put Adams up there. How do you feel about Ridley? Because man, he was awesome last year, but some of those same concerns, how much longer will Matt Ryan be playing at a high level? Ridley's second contract is coming up. Maybe they do dip their toes in the water with another high-end receiver. How confident are you that Ridley truly belongs in this tier and that 2020 wasn't, maybe his best season when we look back at things in 10 years?
I like Ridley a lot. I think he's kind of always underrated. Like he's had, he looked really good entering the season. He delivered with this big breakout year. He was a pretty strong prospect. He was an older prospect, but he came out early. And I think he's never really gotten like full credit for just how good of a prospect and how good of a NFL career he's had to date. I'm not that worried about the situation long-term, partly because I think the Falcons may take a quarterback. And they may start planning for, that's a spot where you could see maybe Lance going. Yeah. If the 49ers go Fields, then Lance could go 5 or go 4 to the Falcons. So right there, you're like, all right, well, the quarterback, the future is in place. I think Ridley belongs in this tier. I think he's going to have a little bit to prove as Julio sort of ages out, but by the same token, I think, he's going to slowly take over the alpha role in that offense. Yeah. And so he should see his volume increase a little bit as we go forward too.
He truly only busted one game last year, got goose-egged by Jair Alexander and the Packers. But man, go back and look at those 5 targets. And I'm still pinning that as those on Matt Ryan more so than Ridley. He was open. I'm taking that one to the grave. Good stuff. Certainly, someone that again will be in my top 10 season-long wide receivers for sure. Moving on, you have 3 second-year receivers in the wide receiver 1 range: Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, and CeeDee Lamb. Really before last year's draft, the class was being lauded as one of the best groups of receivers that we'd ever seen. I think they, kind of lived up to that in at least their first season. Other than them, though, so no Jefferson, Higgins, Lamb. Which other second-year receiver do you think has a chance to maybe make a leap into this tier next season? And why is it Brandon Aiyuk?
It is Brandon Aiyuk.
Yes, let's go. Let's go.
And I really wanted to say Laviska Shenault because me and Overzet on our pod, we're always we were playing a highlight reel every time we drafted Shenault. I really like Shenault. I think you're going to see a huge increase, obviously, in the quarterback play. I think the offense there is going to move faster. But Brandon Aiyuk is looking like first of all, we're going to get a quarterback upgrade now in San Francisco. We know that. That's huge. He was highly productive in college. He's showing that he can operate at all depths of the field. At times last year, he was getting used kind of pigeonholed as a deep threat. But at other times, he was getting used on a lot of shallow stuff, they were taking advantage of his after the catch ability. But by the end of the season, he was operating as like a true number 1 wide receiver, running a ton of routes, getting used at all depths of the field. He's got great size. I think he's developing into their alpha wide receiver. And I think he could end up being Kyle Shanahan's version of AJ Brown. Ooh. I thought you'd like that.
Just let that one linger, man. That is pretty. I agree 100%. Okay. George Kittle and Deebo Samuel are fantastic too, but you look at Kittle and he, you could say he's a better blocker than a receiver. I wouldn't, but he's just so good. We've seen Shanahan lean into him just more as a blocker. The guy can do a lot of things. You just don't necessarily need to feed him as many targets as he can get. Deebo Samuel, man, the dude had more yards after the catch than receiving yards last season. Right. They basically use him as a running back, and he's very good at what he does. But yes, Brandon Aiyuk, 128 target pace last season, even though he was on the COVID list twice and he had, 2 or 3 games where, like you said, he wasn't even kind of being used used as a full featured number one yet, was almost being more typecast as a yak guy, which is what he was profiling as coming out. I thought, just in terms of just who looked the best as a rookie, I would say Justin Jefferson takes that honor, but I thought Aiyuk was honestly number two. Yeah. I understand, Higgins, Lamb, they might have, more volume coming their way, but yeah, just Aiyuk, what he could do in the red zone deep after the catch. I mean, the guy jumps over a dude against the Eagles and has another 10 amazing highlights that we can feasibly put before that because he's that complete of a receiver. Absolutely love the call on Aiyuk. And real quick, while we're on the subject, Visca Chenault, man, if you just look at we opened up the podcast talking about rookies and really trying to buy them closer to their floor than their ceiling. I feel like Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark right now are being priced much closer to their, low end of range of outcomes.
I agree. I don't think people are factoring that this offense is going to be a lot better with you're adding Trevor Lawrence, and the quarterback play was really bad last year. And the coaching was bad too. I mean,
everything was bad.
Everything was bad. Everyone wanted to go home last year. And now all season. Now they're going to have a really exciting young core. And yeah, I think the fact that you have Shark there, I think Jones could help a little bit. I'm a little concerned with Chenault that, if they're not constantly running out of three wide receivers, maybe he isn't playing, all the snaps. He isn't running all the routes, and they have Jones and Shark out there for the two wide receiver set. But Laviska Shenault, I think his upside is to play on the outside and in the slot and get a few snaps in the backfield and be that kind of dynamic, versatile guy that we expected him to be coming in. So, yeah, you can draft Aiyuk and Shenault. You can get them both.
Now, if you want to hop on the Aegis bandwagon with me, man, I just don't even consider Marvin Jones like a player anymore. I'm just out. And when you're out, that lets us focus on Visca and Chark and those other guys. So we'll see. Marvin's been great over these last few years. I'm just not going to go out of my way even a little bit to draft a 30-plus receiver, changing teams into an uncertain situation.
Me neither. I'm just worried he might hurt the routes for Chenault.
Fair. Very fair. All right, we're going to take a quick break to pay some bills. 68 teams started the tournament. Only the best have survived. I have heard this NCAA tournament has been very compelling, although I do spend most of my time watching YouTube football highlights as opposed to that. But if you're a normal person, you can go to DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. Is putting new customers in the center of the action. Bet $1 on any tournament game. And if your team wins, you win $100. It's that simple. Don't worry if college basketball isn't for you. DraftKings Sportsbook offers daily odds boosts on pro basketball, a real sport like hockey, golf, and so much more. So download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF when you sign up to turn $1 into $100. If the college basketball team of your choosing pulls off the win, that's code PFF to turn one more time $1 into $100 for a limited time. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Pat, one of my biggest takeaways so far from doing best ball drafts is that the public absolutely loves Jonathan Taylor. I mean, I wouldn't say he's the consensus RB4, but you're seeing him in this, first 4-6 running backs almost unanimously drafted. I don't know, man. He's a stud. He's great with the ball in his hands. Nyheim Hines is still there. Marlon Mack is back in action. And going from Phillip Rivers, even the late career Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz is objectively a downgrade. What do you make of Jonathan Taylor, and are you comfortable using a first-round pick on him?
Yeah, I was way ahead of consensus last year, in Dynasty on Taylor. It felt like I was ahead of consensus on him for a lot of last year early on. I kind of rode the wave when everyone got on board. I was also on board at the end of the season. Then in the playoff contest, I thought he was getting overdrafted there. He was overowned in various playoff contests, in my opinion. And now I'm worried I'm not going to be above consensus on this guy for the next 2-3 years. Cause I'm totally with you. He's an awesome running back, but I'm not in love with this offense. And I'm not all that convinced he'll catch enough passes. He gets used somewhat as a pass catcher. He's not going to get, the complete just grinder treatment, but he's not a true workhorse. He's kind of a little bit in the Nick Chubb type of mold, and Nick Chubb is awesome, but Nick Chubb is not going to put up the type of points like Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. I mean, it's like you talk about, this is fantasy land. We need the guys who have the right type of profile. It's not just about what these guys are doing on the NFL field, how good of a skill set they have at what they do best. Jonathan Taylor as a pure runner is absolutely fantastic, but Is he going to rack up those PPR points in the same way? And you're paying for him like he is, the number 4 player overall. You're paying for that. I don't think he's that guy yet. I think he could be once Hines goes. Hines is a free agent after the year. I think Taylor can develop into that, but I'm not ready to draft him like he is that guy right now.
This situation is like far closer to almost like what the Bears are dealing with than I think anyone wants to admit. Taylor, like David Montgomery, absolutely smashed over the past, over the last 2 months of last season. A lot of that because of the schedule, man. I mean, look, credit to Taylor. He doesn't control who he's facing, on the other side of the ball. But when you finish your hot stretch against the Packers, Texans, Raiders, Texans, Steelers, touche, and the Jaguars, it's just like, okay. Did we really see him take over, or did we see a slightly banged up Jordan Wilkins, not really step forward, and Taylor take advantage of, an end of the season run? Bringing back Marlon Mack is not good at all. Nyheim Hines is still the pass down back. And not having Rivers there not only hurts the overall, I think, offensive scoring chances, but they're also not going to be thrown to the running backs nearly as often. So Jonathan Taylor, RB1, just not the RB1 that a lot of people are making him out to be right now. I do not expect to be exiting many drafts with him, and I'm comfortable with that at the moment. I want to stick with these rising second years backs. I mean, look, we talked about the wide receiver class, but this running back group is pretty awesome in its own right as well. Taylor, Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins, James Robinson. Hell, we'll even throw A.J. Dillon in there. New game, Pat. I'm leading it off with you, man. So hopefully you don't make me look too stupid, but buy, trade, marry. Buying means you want to trade for them right now. Trade, you want to get rid of them. Marry, you don't want to give them up at all. Pick 3.
So the buy is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 2020 was ugly, but still was a first round pick. He's still on the Chiefs. Looking at some of the PFF metric, didn't embarrass himself. He's running back 13 in elusive rating, right between Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara. It's a little bit similar to David Montgomery going into last year, where it's like, okay, he was breaking a lot of tackles. He's elusive, but we need to see the long runs show up. We need to see improvement in the receiving game, but we do see players take a leap in their second year. And, while Montgomery needed Tariq Cohen's injury to kind of unlock that additional work for him, I think it's already kind of lining up for Edwards-Helaire with Damian Williams being cut. I think that's like kind of sneaky big, because I was expecting Damian Williams to come back and have a role. They go ahead and move on right away. And it allows Edwards-Helaire to kind of take over from Darryl. And I think he has a chance to do that. And if he has that backfield mostly to himself next year and he's a little bit better, he will be a smash. So you're taking on a little bit of risk with him. And, you could argue, hey, trade for DeAndre Swift, trade for Cam Akers, which I think those guys are great. But Edwards-Helaire feels a little bit undervalued to me right now. J.K. Dobbins would be the guy I'd trade away. I do expect him to be the Ravens lead back. I also think he's very good. But, if I'm trading this guy away, I'm assuming this is Dynasty. And in Dynasty, young running backs are very, very pricey. Yeah. Young running backs have most of their upside already baked in. We're looking for the next star. We're looking for the next Dalvin Cook, the next Alvin Kamara. And so you're paying for that potential that they turn into a 20-plus point per game type of dude. If a guy turns into a serviceable running back, that's actually a huge loss for you. Yeah. It's a ton of opportunity costs. If you want that, you can go trade for Chris Carson. You're looking for a guy that's going to be priced above $8K on DraftKings next year. That's what you're paying for right now with J.K. Dobbins. I'm not sure he's ever going to be that guy in this offense. I think the Ravens are probably going to keep rotating in other backs to keep him fresh. They're not going to throw to the running back all that much. So I'm starting to get a little bit nervous about him hitting that huge ceiling. That's why I would trade him away. And then I want to marry Antonio Gibson. Ooh. Antonio Gibson, his red flag coming in was that he might be a satellite pass catching running back. That is this guy even a running back? He's only had 8 touches or whatever in his entire career. He's very explosive, but he's just a total project. Now the red flag is that he's a 2-down grinder who doesn't catch passes, and J.D. McKissic's in the pass catching role. This is a fake red flag. He's a converted wide receiver. He's explosive after the catch. He does have the capability to turn into a 3-down workhorse. I think they were bringing him along slowly. He wasn't great in pass protection last year, but he's a bigger running back. I think that's something he can add on in year 2. And you've got Ryan Fitzpatrick now. I think this is going to be an offense that's a lot more functional. It's going to score more points. I honestly think he's got Christian McCaffrey year 2 upside. I think it's plausible that the hype starts on him enough this season that by August he's a top 10 high stakes pick. And it's very plausible to me that he's a top 5 dynasty pick by after the season heading into 2022.
DC CMC, man, let's make it happen. I don't see
I
why
love that.
not. I mean, that was the issue last year. It was thinking, I thought Peyton Barber was going to be the issue. Yeah, exactly. What is Gibson as a between the tackles runner? He overcomes that in 1 week. It was just JD freaking McKissick that had to hold back the targets. Yep. So in terms of just best case scenario, 3-down potential, I do think Antonio Gibson deserves number 1 spot. Would you agree if, let's say, you're feeling warm and you can marry 2 people here, Gibson and Cam Akers as the other one, just in terms of just raw total volume? I mean, it seems like Akers could be setting up to be, McVay's newest Todd Gurley.
Yeah, it would have been Swift, but then the trade happens, and now I'm with you on Akers. Because I think Swift is like a type of running back that we're looking for. He's kind of that Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones type of running back, and that to me is the perfect fantasy running back where you don't even need all the touches. You can kind of get there on less work. But post-trade, the new coaching staff, just the Lions not having like any weapons, I agree. I think it's Akers. I think he could be huge. And here's my dog barking for Akers. So
the dog's sad about the Swift situation too. I mean, it's one of these things we gotta be adjusting to. Swift can do it all. We already had, like one of the first things Dan Campbell comes out and says, is the token offseason coach speak. Really excited to use him more as a receiver in the slot next year. So they're saying the right things that could happen, but just realize, Lions probably the single worst team in the league right now. Usually that doesn't end up producing too many fantasy friendly goal line situations.
Yeah, and I think, running backs are generally like they're getting their value from their offense more than creating value for the offense. And, as good as Swift is, he's still going to get most of his value from whether or not the Lions offense is functional and scoring points. The Rams offense looks like it could be really good. So I think Akers is pretty exciting. I just think Akers, everyone's excited about Akers. He's going to go high. He's very expensive in Dynasty. He's expensive in redraft. I think Gibson still, some of his upside isn't quite priced in yet.
All about identifying that value. Only thing I would add is I'd be looking a little bit to sell, for the right price, maybe not sell James Robinson because he's not at his highest value anymore, but I'm worried about it, man. Them adding Hyde isn't the worst thing in the world, but we can't overlook that Hyde, was very successful for the new head coach in Jacksonville the last time they were together. I don't feel like they're done addressing the running back room. My biggest issue is like Jacksonville quietly, really over the past, 5 years, like the whole Fournette era, this was one of, only a handful of teams in the league that was willing to give their RB1 a true 3-down workload. And it seems like a bit of a stretch to assume that Robinson's going to have that in a new offense. So yeah, you're probably not getting a ton for him right now. So I'm not saying you should go out and sell him, but just in the way the drafts are going, man, when I see him there in kind of that RB2 range, not someone I'm, actively looking to pull the trigger on.
Yeah. And you're now dealing with the offensive coordinator that didn't commit to DeAndre Swift. He was playing Adrian Peterson.
Old ass.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, Swift is better. He's a better running back than James Robinson. There's no doubt in my mind. And so I don't think they're going to commit to, like 85, 90% snap rate that James Robinson was getting.
I think Robinson will lead the Jaguars in touches. The problem is that number is going to start with a 2 instead of a 3, we would have projected last year. All right. So looking at some of these spots that don't have their RB ingrained, decent chance, I think the eventual starting RB for the Dolphins, Jets, Steelers, Falcons, maybe the Cardinals, with all due respect for Chase Edmonds. Might not even be on their roster at the moment. Which of these fits would you be most pumped about a high-end rookie RB joining? So whether you're at ETN, Najee Harris, whoever, you're standing in this draft class, who do you want your number one? What team would you want your number one RB to land on?
I don't think this is the best, but I do think it's just kind of interesting that I think the Jets are actually a decent landing spot, and it's the Jets. So it just seems kind of gross by default, but they're going to have a new quarterback. They got a new coaching staff. You're going to get the Shanahan style offense. I think that would be pretty interesting to get. Like ETN there would be pretty interesting to me. I think the Falcons are a pretty good landing spot despite the Mike Davis signing. I think if they take a running back high enough, then Davis could just be kind of a pure backup, an insurance policy. And so if the running back is good, you could be looking at a workhorse role there. And I think the Falcons will have a functional offense and probably an improved offense from last year. So that would be probably the best landing spot, assuming the Cardinals aren't dumb enough to draft a running back, because they don't have a 3rd-round pick. They really shouldn't draft a running back, but it would be pretty exciting if they did for fantasy purposes. I think that's probably the best landing spot. You have, Kyler Murray, you've got that explosive element. If you added like ETN there with his explosion, that would be really, really fun. So that's kind of my dream scenario.
Yeah, we're going to need to watch that situation closer because Chase Edmonds, he's only had 2 like featured games as a starter. He got 29 and 28 touches on 94 and 96% snap rates. So I realized last year, it was pretty split down the middle with Edmonds and Drake. But if you go back to 2019, man, whoever it was, Drake, Edmonds, even David Johnson before he got injured, those guys were getting featured, pretty much more than anyone. So if it does shape up where the Cardinals don't draft someone and we're looking at Edmonds, Benjamin, and, whoever the hell else they dragging off the streets, Chase Edmonds is going to be quickly in that RB1 discussion based on volume alone. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just say, with the Cardinals as well, even if Edmonds is involved this year and they do draft a running back, Edmonds is a free agent after the year. So you're kind of in that spot where it's like a rookie can have a pretty solid year there, and then Edmonds leaves, and now we're all super, super excited about him entering the year. So you get kind of that free look situation with if they draft a running back. Another reason to be excited about it.
Yeah, all the situations, man. If the Dolphins don't add anybody again, which wouldn't make a ton of sense, but Myles Gaskin all of a sudden is more enticing.
I kind of like Myles Gaskin. I hope they don't draft anyone.
I do too, man. He was their 3-down guy doing everything they wanted. He, he didn't score 6 touchdowns in week 16, but he came pretty close to still winning a lot of fantasy championships. I guess Pittsburgh is the interesting one. Like, they have to add someone, I think. I just don't see them entering 2021 with Benny Snell and McFarland as their top 2. If by some way they don't add any running back of substance, is there a running back in Pittsburgh you would like, or are you just kind of staying away from that offense in general, at least as far as this muddled running back situation will go?
I actually just in these FFPC dynasty leagues, you have to cut down to 14 skill players by March 31st. So I literally did just cut Benny Snell from one of them.
There you go.
So I'm like, even if this all breaks right, like how good is Benny? Is he a top 14 player on my roster? Like, no, he isn't. So I'm not that excited.
The best case scenario for the backup running backs is still like, yeah, you know what? I'm good. Yeah. Quick note. We've been talking a lot about best ball, and truly, people, if you like fantasy football and if you like playing fantasy for money, you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's got everything, including season-long and playoff best ball. Best ball is a season-long game where you draft a team like you normally do, but that's it. There's no in-season roster management. Underdog automatically selects your best performers each week, saving you loads of time. Go to Underdog Fantasy and deposit $10 using promo code PFF and get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's promo code PFF. Draft now at Underdog Fantasy. Just completed one last night with my guys Andrew Erickson and Jared Evans. Had a nice little Ryan Tannehill, AJB, Anthony Ferguson stat. Nice. I'm looking forward to getting that championship money come December or so. We'll just wait out the months in the meantime. So good stuff there over at Underdog Fantasy, code PFF. 3 more questions for you, Pat, and we're gonna get a little quirky now. Fantasy aside, just who do you think is the best running back in the league? Neutral situation. God turns off injuries. Salary cap isn't an issue. We're giving the ball to one human being 400 times. Who is it?
I think it's Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
We saw how good this offense was without him, and it was not good at all. I think it just gives you even more appreciation for what he was doing before he got hurt and, to start his career. Obviously, we need him to be fully healthy following the injury, but you said, I can turn on God mode here, and I'm going to do it. He's fully healthy. His knee's never been better. Just the speed, the power, the insane elusiveness, his receiving ability, his size, like he's got everything you're looking for. I just want him on a good offense and nowhere near Jason Garrett.
Exactly, man. Please just put the clapper down at this point, or send him to college or something. My goodness. Yeah, man, I'm with you. I think this is the receiving part with Saquon, because if you want to argue ball in their hand, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Saquon, I think you can make a good argument for any of those guys. But Saquon got 91 balls as a rookie, man. He's doing it looking smooth as hell. They've lined him up as a true receiver, and he's done double moves and stuff before. Truly, yes, I'm with you. The best running back in the league, when healthy, when everything's going right. Just please please, Jason Garrett, just don't do anything too crazy this year. He gave Saquon that massive role in week 1 in that Pittsburgh game, the only time we saw him. So I'm optimistic. I have Saquon, certainly in that tier 1 RB group you should be taking before your first wide receiver. But just know, not exactly the perfect offense to be taking the workhorse back from, but Saquon is something special for sure. Pat, if you could change one thing about fantasy football as a whole, no matter how unrealistic, what would it be and why?
I went really unrealistic with this. So every week, everyone gets to pick one player, and then what their exact stat line will be. But it's impossible to share that information with anyone else.
So you could just would they have to be on your team, or you can look at anyone? Just
anyone in the league. You can just pick. I'm going to use my free ability to see what happens with on this player, any player you want.
I didn't even consider that, but it's actually pretty awesome. In no way could we ever make this happen. But hey, that's my fault for throwing unrealistic.
You said as unrealistic as you want. Well, that's how I went with it.
I had 2 words written down in my notes: kill kickers. I mean that figuratively, but I don't want kickers. I don't want kickers in fantasy or real life football. And people go, yeah, and that's always a backlash I get. I go, remove kickers from fantasy football, and people go, like, you're just lazy. You don't want to learn all the nuances of fantasy football. And I go, great, let's remove them from the real thing as well. Man, like, nothing would piss me off more than being in high school and having, your soccer player of the year walk over for 15 minutes, like once a week, and pretend like they're a part of the team. It's a disgrace, as someone that's been trying to explain to my girlfriend for a while, like, how football works, and we're still struggling. Like, I don't even address the kicking game because that's just an entirely new can of worms that really isn't that important, but just makes everything that much more complicated. So kickers, I don't like you in real life or fantasy. Get out of the great game that we know and love called football. And that's that. Pat, we saved the best for last. Ronald Jones season. Now, this is our first time talking. We were in an auction draft last summer. My first ever auction draft. It was Saturday. I'd been drinking for several hours at this point. Ronald Jones comes up. I know Ronald Jones is your guy. I decided in that moment that there was no way I was losing Ronald Jones to you. Now, my auction team did terrible. So that my moral of the story is not that you should draft Ronald Jones, but I did take Ronald Jones from you for like $25 or something absolutely absurd at the moment. So with that said, I did that ironically. I hope you're not too hurt from that moment, but let's talk about his real life fit. Obviously, he's a great player, but with Lombardi Lenny back, things are looking muddled. What are your thoughts on the Tampa Bay backfield, objectively?
Yeah, so this Ronald Jones thing kind of happened like naturally or accidentally. Like I never foresaw that. Yeah, that I was going to kind of like become this huge Ronald Jones truther, but it's always been kind of about his ADP. So in 2019, people were leaving him for dead because he had this terrible rookie year, but I thought he was a really strong prospect. He was a 2nd round pick. They had a new coaching staff, as it turns out, a much, much better coaching staff, but they still had the GM that drafted him. And I'm like, hey, we shouldn't leave this guy for dead. So I ended up having a ton of Ronald Jones in 2019. And then in 2020, couldn't stop drafting him because people were assuming he was going to be a backup to Keyshawn Vaughn. Then he was going to be a backup to Leonard Fournette. And so, he had shown by that point that he's actually a pretty solid running back. He was running back 16 in elusive rating. In 2019, he was actually running back 5 in yards per route run in 2019. They used him a lot in the screen game. So, I had a ton of him last year. At this point, I actually do think he's probably fairly priced in the 7th to 8th round range. We know he's not getting the 3rd down work. We know that. It's like there was almost nothing more consistent last year when you look at the numbers than like it's 3rd down, Ronald Jones comes off the field. Yeah. So that's a problem with our fantasy running backs. But I do think he still has some week-to-week upside. He's an explosive runner. He should get some goal line work. He's got to fall into about the 9th round range before I think he'll be mispriced again. But I expect him to. I think that as draft season moves on, people will start to view Leonard Fournette as the starter, Ronald Jones more as a backup committee running back, and he will fall into that 9th, 10th, 11th round range. And I expect to be bugging Pete Overzet to be drafting him in all our high stakes leagues once again.
9th, 10th round range. That's when we'll be back in on.
That's when we'll be back in.
It's like he's so bad in the receiving game that people just like really assume that he is this bad running back. When, dude, I mean, he looks so good as just a pure runner. Once you get the ball, once you complete the act of transporting the ball from the quarterback to Ronald Jones, like he is truly fantastic. But yeah, man, it's like, look, freaking Fournette wouldn't be the assumed pass down back on almost any other roster in the league, but because Rojo is the competition for that role, it just works out that way. I just remember it was week 5 and Ronald Jones catches a touchdown. Like he goes down, scoops it, rolls into the end zone, and the refs rule incomplete. And Rojo just like flips the ball. The guy like, yeah, you know, sucks. I dropped that one. And we see the replay and he caught the ball. I've never seen an NFL player catch the ball, be told it's incomplete, and just, you know, whatever is what it is. Not surprised.
And they didn't challenge that, right? Or they
didn't challenge it because he didn't even believe he caught it.
So frustrating. Yeah.
Oh man.
But hey, he'll always have that 98-yard run, Ian.
I can't. By the way, don't be the person in August that tells me I shouldn't draft Rojo, because if you take away all of his big runs, he actually didn't do anything. I hate that. A lesser running back wouldn't have ripped off that.
Yeah, that's the thesis of the whole play, is that he's a fast running back and he's got enough size to take it to the house.
Thank you, Pat. You get it. Pat gets it. I hope you all have gotten more of it after listening to Pat and I discuss these topics. Fantastic stuff, Pat. Let people know what you have on the docket for the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, I've got a rankings update coming out very soon at Established to Run. Got rookie ranks coming out at Established to Run very soon as well. Ship chasing every Wednesday night with Pete Overzet and Ben Gretsch. It's about to be draft season. We're going to start doing some best ball drafts, and then before you know it, we're going to be doing our regular high stakes drafts over there. So that's what you got to look forward to. My dog's been about to bark for the last 10 minutes, and I've been trying to keep him under wraps. So I feel like that's a great way to end it. Your dog going.
Yeah, I just had PFF Lily bark a little bit too. Oh, there she goes. Yeah, I think PFF Lily surprised Pete Overset is still a football guy. I thought he was just an NBA Top Shot thought leader at this point. But good.
I did ask him last night about his thoughts on the quarterback class, and he hasn't quite gotten his research started.
Too good. All right, so at the risk of I'll try to get the dog barks out of our listeners' ears now. Thank you, Pat. People can find you on Twitter at Pat Kerrane, PATKERRANE. Fantastic follow. And again, check out Established to Run for all the ranks. He's Pat. This has been the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.